It's probably because the leaves are old, which I think means that it should have been brewed for longer, if anything. But I don't know how tea works, really. I just kind of pretend.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fits Happy. I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And this episode, we're talking about Chapter 30, Shakedown. And we're starting with Althea. They've gotten underway, and she is speaking with Amber right now, who is very frustrated at the small quarters.
Yes, she is frustrated not just at the small quarters, but also that Jack has once again left her sea bag in Amber's way.
Yes. If she leaves her gear bag sticking out from under her bunk one more time, I'm going to kill her. And Althea's just like, why is Amber so upset?
Yes.
This is normal stuff.
Yeah, I think she understands why Amber's upset, but she's kind of like, well, this is not that big of a deal.
Althea's just trying to calm her down, saying it's just the cramped quarters, kick it as hard as you can.
Yeah, take a breath, tell yourself it doesn't actually matter, then kick it as hard as you can.
Amber stares at her and then turns and kicks it savagely. And then comes back and just says, I hate this. I've seen coffins that were bigger than this bed. I can't even sit up all the way. Althea's trying to joke around, saying, like, if it's bad weather, then you'll be grateful because you can brace yourself and still sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really helping Amber at this point because Amber is not receptive to her joking right now. So Althea's asking her, like, you really hate this, don't you? Like, really, really hate this.
Yeah, I think Althea is thinking this is a case of cramped quarters. It's annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And not realizing this is fundamentally everything that Amber hates.
Right.
This is genuinely the worst case scenario for Amber's living situation. And so Amber is not as easy to, it doesn't have as easy of spirits to lift.
Right. And Amber replies to Althea saying, all my life, I've always had somewhere I could go to be alone. To go without solitude is like going without salt. Brashen offered you the use of his room when he is not in it. It used to be my room, Amber said without rancor. Now it is his, with his things in it. That is all the difference in the world. I cannot settle myself there. I feel like an intruder, nor can I latch the door against the world. Althea tries to think a little bit and then suggests, it would not be much, but you could curtain your bunk with canvas. It would be a tiny space, but Jack and I would respect it. Or you could learn to climb the rigging. Up at the top of the mast is an entirely different world. Exposed to everyone's view, Amber suggested sarcastically, but there was a note of interest in her voice. Up there, the sky and the ocean are so large that the little world below you does not matter. In reality, once you are up the mast, you are almost invisible to anyone on deck. Take a look up there the next time you're on deck. Perhaps I shall. Her voice was low again, almost subdued. Althea judged it was best to leave her alone and thought that this was something that she had seen multiple times and she'll either crack under the pressure or eventually adjust.
Right.
And doesn't think that Amber is the cracking type.
Right. She does also mention that usually the people who crack are the ones who come onto a boat with this feeling of wanting adventure and this new grand life. And then 5 days in, they realize it's just monotonous and not at all as exciting as they dreamed it would be.
Right.
And that's the kind of people who usually crack and take others with them. So at least Amber isn't that.
Now, Althea's kind of reflecting on the voyage so far, saying that Paragon has not been jolly at all, but he had not descended into one of his morose moods either. And for those blessings she thanks Sa. The other side of the coin was that she was having problems with the crew. In fact, she was having the very kind of problems that Brashen had predicted she would, damn him. Somehow that made it impossible to go to him for advice. She had been so cocky back on the beach. She had been sure she could handle herself and the men under her command. Now her crew seemed bent on proving the opposite. Not all of them, to be fair, she reminded herself. Most, she thought, would have fallen into line well enough, if not for half. He bucked her at every opportunity. Worse, he was charismatic. The others easily fell in with his attitude. He was handsome, clean, and engaging. He always had a cheery word or a jest for his shipmates. He sprang to it readily when another man was in trouble. He was the ideal shipmate, well liked by the rest of the crew. His own natural leadership, she decided wearily, was exactly why he was always at odds with her. Her sex was the rest of the issue. He seemed to have no problems taking orders from Brashen or Lavoy. That was another reason why she could not take her grievances to them. This was something she'd have to unknot for herself. So now we're getting to the heart of the issue in this chapter for Althea. She's trying to decide how to take command.
Right.
And prove to the crew that she should be second mate.
Right. And a lot of her problem is stemming from the fact that she's being stubborn, right? Like, Brashen warned her this would happen, and because she said it wouldn't and he did, she now refuses to ask for help. Although with that, I kind of understand, because also you can't really run to the captain for help and look like you're worthy of being second mate.
Right.
I guess, regardless of Brashen's friendship with Althea, I don't think there would be a good separation there. So even though her reasoning is more of a, well, I can't let him know he's right, I do think it's a good call not to go to him.
Yeah, but I understand her bias against Lavoy, but this is exactly the kind of thing that you bring up the chain of command, right? He's first mate for a reason. At least go to him to make him aware of the situation and for advice. So if something does come out of it, then the first mate knows beforehand.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess.
I think it's just Althea being stubborn and, again, thinking that she alone has to fix things.
Right. That's a good point. She definitely has that Vestrit woman stubborn streak that Greg was just complaining about.
Because I think this is true now that I'm recalling my memory of these books from a long time ago, but I believe the rumor going around is that she does like Hef, right?
Hef, yeah.
Hef. She likes Hef or something, or is like sweet on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of like the rumor that's going around because she's not doing anything against him.
Right.
And he's making all of these kind of like charismatic overtures and whatever. And there's a little bit of insinuation in this chapter as well, but I think in the future that like is brought up by Brashen too. So like it's getting around the ship. So I think her being isolated and thinking she has to solve everything and not taking action on it is making it worse for her.
Yeah.
In a certain situation. So I don't know. It's something that she needs to learn, and she is trying to deal with it the best way possible that she knows. But it's definitely a tough situation because Hef isn't doing anything openly insubordinate. He's just being very subtle and kind of undermining her authority in weird ways.
Right. And she goes on to say that. She says that it would be easier if he was being more overt with his insubordination, but instead he makes her look incompetent. Yeah. Which is harder to prove because whenever he's working with all the other sailors, he does more than his fair share of work and he is super friendly. He's a really hard worker. And then whenever she's paired with him, he does way less than he's supposed to, making her carry more of the load. And she knows she's not strong enough to carry more than her share of the load, though she is confident in her strength in general. She's aware of that shortcoming. But whenever she one time said, put your back into it, everybody thought it was because she was a weak girl that couldn't handle the work because he always does more than his fair share. So he's really subtly making her look incompetent and she doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. He had an air of rakish showmanship that turned the simplest job aloft into a feat, disdain for her command and a certain relish of risk. Uncomfortably, she recalled a young sailor named Devon who had shared those traits and how she had admired him. No wonder her father had gotten rid of him. Hef's other trick was to defer to her as a woman rather than as the mate in command. He would make a sly show of stepping aside to allow her to precede him, or offer her a rope or tool as if it were a cup of tea. This last brought snickers from the other men, and today Lop had been fool enough to imitate it. He had been clumsily obvious as he bobbed his head obsequiously to her. Their positions had been right, and she had delivered a substantial kick to his butt that had sent him down the companionway ahead of her. There had been a great general laugh of support for her, ruined when some faceless wag called, "No luck, Lop. She likes half better'n you." From the corner of her eye, she had seen Half grin broadly at the remark and waggle his tongue. She had pretended not to have seen simply because there was no good way to deal with it. She thought she had pulled it off until she saw the look on Clef's face. Disappointment was writ large on his face. He had turned aside from her, shamed by her shame. So I want to talk about that too, because yeah, it's awful that he does those things, but the minute that somebody else does it, she punishes that somebody else.
Right.
And not Half. And Clef looking like he's disappointed, I don't think it's because she's shamed by it. I think it's because he's disappointed that she's showing favoritism or something like that. You know, I think she's in her own head about how this looks.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's this weird position where we as readers, because we're not in the situation, are like, just punish him.
Right.
Just do something. You cannot continue to ignore it, especially if you're going to punish other people. And she just won't. And obviously she can't hear us. So.
Yeah, apparently Half handing her things like a cup of tea repeatedly enough to where the Lop, who is, by Althea's estimation, slow-witted, starts to imitate it. Like that's happened enough where you should say something. And then to the first time Lop does it, punish Lop. Just, oh man.
I know.
Althea, optics.
Right. And it's so weird because she's so concerned with optics of, I think she's gotten in her head that Half is personable. So she punishes him. It'll look worse.
Right. Yeah.
But okay, not punishing him is then giving him the green light to do it. And I don't want to blame her for what Half is doing. It's not her fault that he's being a jerk and undermining her power in this way.
Right.
But also she needs to be able to recognize that her ignoring it is making the situation worse. I understand the first time or the first 2 times not knowing what to do and being caught off guard, but then you need to make a plan because you know it's going to happen again. And she's not doing that. And it's really frustrating to watch. And then also her believing that, like you said, her believing that Clef is looking aside at her shame and not realizing it's not that at all. It's because it does seem like she has a crush on this dude and she's letting him do whatever he wants. It's just, ugh. Also gross of him to waggle his tongue and just bad situation. All of it bad.
But again, she affirms that she has to walk this line alone. And Amber speaks up and kind of guesses what's on her mind. And Althea says that, hey, that's spooky, don't do that. How did you know I was thinking of that? And Amber's like, it's a classic trick because you're restless right now. But they're discussing now how to help Althea, how to fix this problem.
Right. And Althea says she'd like to give Half a kick in the balls. And Amber points out that would be the worst way to go about this situation because then it makes him more relatable to everyone else and they would all feel way more sorry for him and like her less.
Amber says, it would be seen as a whore's trick, a woman hitting a man where he is most vulnerable. You can't be seen that way. You have to be perceived as a mate giving an uppity hand a takedown. Prove you're better than he is, that you deserve to be second mate. That's his real problem, you know. He thinks that if you stepped aside and became a passenger, he'd step up into your spot. And he would, Althea conceded. He's a competent sailor and a natural leader. He'd be a good second or even a first. Well, there's your other option. Step aside and let him be second. No, that's my spot. Then defend it, Amber suggested. But because you're already on top, you have to fight fair. So she just advises, wait for a moment, seize it, but make sure you have a moment where you can show that you are a better sailor. And that's true advice.
Yeah.
I think Amber is not seeing the whole picture in this either because she's staying below deck. She's not a sailor. She's not in the moments. And she gets Althea's version of this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're reading it wrong. Maybe, it is just as Althea is explaining it, but to me, it doesn't seem like it.
In what way?
What we're talking about, how Althea's just showing favoritism to Half because of not punishing him, taking her time in this. And Amber is giving advice based on Althea's side of the story, right? Just like bide your time, wait for the moment, then show everyone that you're a better sailor.
Right. Well, I think it's two separate problems. And so this is good advice for the problem of how to get Half to respect her, I guess, as a leader and not treat her as a woman first and foremost. And so like that part is good advice, but I think you're right. It does ignore the aspect of her not doing anything to his weird gestures and remarks and making it seem as though it's favoritism.
See, I totally agree. Yeah. But that second part there is what I don't think either of them see as an issue. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the problem.
Right. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know why Althea wouldn't be able to see that as an issue. Maybe because this has never happened to her and there's not typically women on board.
Right.
But then she knew that Jack might be an issue because she's flirty with the men. So I don't know.
She's too close to the situation.
I guess.
And she always has to assume that it's because she's a woman that these things are happening, right? Mm. I mean, it is. Half can be, a sexist sailor here, right, thinking that he would be a better sailor in general. But also, I think it's because she is an attractive woman who is on ship right now, and she doesn't see that aspect that Half maybe could be making overtures towards her. Maybe he is playing into what is perceived as Althea's crush on Half. Right. I think Althea is just, it's always about how I'm not good enough as a sailor.
Right.
And I think it's a multidimensional issue.
Yeah, that's fair. And I guess the waiting to bide your time to show off that you are better doesn't mean that you have to wait and just let him do whatever he's going to do and ignore the problem. You can still react to the things happening to you, but you need to wait to show that you're a good enough sailor to really shut him up and shut it down fully. I don't know.
Well, they kind of shut that conversation down and leave that to its end. Amber gives her advice to Althea, and then it's Amber's turn to be restless, and Althea asks her what's wrong.
I haven't your gift.
Yep.
Why don't you tell me what's bothering you?
You wouldn't understand, Amber complained. No one can. Okay. Try me, Althea challenged her. Amber let out a long breath and sighed it out. I'm wondering why you aren't a nine-fingered slave boy. I'm wondering how Paragon can be both a frightened boy and a cruel-hearted man. I'm wondering if I should be aboard this ship at all, or if I was supposed to stay in Bingtown and watch over Malta. Malta? Althea asked incredulously. What does Malta have to do with any of this? That, Amber pointed out wearily, is exactly what I would love to know. So now we get insight into Amber here in the last paragraph of this section before we switch points of view to Kennit. This is what Beloved has been dwelling on and is kind of the heart of the turmoil for Beloved in this trilogy. Mm-hmm. Because the nine-fingered slave boy, as we know, is Wintrow, and at the end, Amber sees him and is like, you're the nine-fingered slave boy, but that's when Wintrow has his tattoo removed by Vivacia.
Right.
And he's like, how did you know? And blah, blah, blah. It's because she's wondering which catalyst she should go with to affect the most change.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think this is the only time we really get an example of multiple catalysts in play. And I guess you could argue that Beloved's involvement with all of the Vestrits has sparked some of the path to go the way that it is. Mm-hmm. However, more so it feels like Wintrow and Malta end up creating the path that Beloved wants without Beloved there, which is an interesting thing to think about when you realize that that kind of leaves the whites as not necessary.
I kind of disagree because I think this is the suboptimal outcome at the end of this trilogy.
Okay.
The serpents, sure, they cocoon and they hatch, but they're like very weak. They're bad. Maybe if she attached herself to Wintrow early, uh, things could have happened swifter. Who knows? I think she's just in her head about like which path should I take between all three of these. And and it does work out, but who knows what have happened if she made a different choice? Maybe things wouldn't have had to go so awry in the very final trilogy, you know?
Mm.
Maybe all the live ships would have known earlier that they're partial, part dragons, and they could have been changed earlier through skill or something. Who knows? So I think, eventually it works out because it's a story. It's a complete story.
Right.
But this is so early on and has ramifications for, Tintaglia is freed, but then Tintaglia has to watch over these dragons. And then the next trilogy, Tintaglia abandons them. And then the dragons have time to grow up themselves, et cetera, et cetera. But who knows what could have happened earlier on?
That's fair. I guess I don't see how it would have been possible for Amber to go along with Malta or Wintrow in any way. So it's probably for the best that she didn't.
Right. Yeah.
But also, I guess, I wonder too about Malta if this is because of the choices made so far. Malta is now a catalyst and wouldn't have been all along. Sort of like choices leading to new
maybe
paths. I don't know. But I do want to know how Althea is a catalyst, if at all, because I don't really know how she affects.
She doesn't really affect anything in my eyes.
So do you think then she's not a catalyst at all?
No, because we've talked about this before. My belief is that everyone is a catalyst.
Right.
Fitz is just kind of like an uber catalyst because he's not supposed to be alive at all. So his existence opens up many opportunities. So that's kind of like the ultimate catalyst, right? The Vestrits are obviously at the crux of a lot of very unique potentials.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes sense to me that the characters in those different weaving plot lines are catalysts themselves that are of import.
Mm-hmm.
But Amber could attach herself to some 3 ships person and make some changes. It just wouldn't be world altering, right?
Okay.
Everyone has, like, philosophy of the White Prophets say, everyone has the potential to make different changes here. It's just that these main people that the White Prophets attach themselves to are the ones that they see at the pivotal points of each of their futures.
Okay.
There can be, hundreds and thousands of different potential futures that this one villager, 26, in Burns somewhere can alter this. And then there's a new bakery that pops up in town. That's a great potential future. But does that matter?
Right.
To the White Prophet, at least.
Yeah. But I guess that's what I'm saying is, does being with Althea alter anything permanently for the future, or is it more of a personal alteration,
I said that Althea doesn't really affect anything, but that's also a lie. I think the combination of her and Brashen really help Paragon out.
Okay.
And I know Paragon is more attached to Brashen, but I think them both being there and both being part of that kind of found family really solidifies Paragon being stable at the end.
Okay.
And succeeding on this trip to meet up with everybody. I think if Althea isn't there, I don't know if Brashen would go.
Okay.
I don't know if he would have volunteered
Right.
for this, which means Paragon doesn't go at all, which means maybe he's not saved at all, which means they don't go to Key Island because they don't have Paragon's knowledge, which means they don't get Kennit's mom, and Kennit's mom can't, help Paragon regain memories and help Kennit rejoin with Paragon. I don't know. There's a whole cascading thing there. But before that point, I don't know if Althea mattered.
That's fair.
I think Amber being a friend to Althea and Brashen helped more than Amber guiding decisions that Althea made.
Fair enough.
So yeah, it's this is a weird situation. It's like different than the Fitz relationship, I guess,
Yeah.
between Catalyst and Prophet.
That's fair. Well, I think it's interesting because Fitz is the only Catalyst we see Amber or Beloved interact with in the way that they do.
Right. Yeah. Every time that she calls him a catalyst, it's always capitalized. Mm-hmm. And the same with like when Night Eyes calls him a like changer or catalyst, it's capitalized. These other ones, I don't know if they mention them, but maybe I'm just making this up, but I thought it was always lowercase, just in general terms.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe when what's her name, the old woman in the first trilogy at the end,
Kettle,
yes. Kestrel is
Kestrel,
okay.
Sorry.
No, Kettle is her name too. When she says catalyst, maybe it's always capitalized too. So maybe they have like one. I think the White Prophets do have like one capital C catalyst.
Right.
But the Fool needs to make changes in other parts of the world as well. So attach themselves to multiple small C catalysts and doesn't know which one to choose to affect the most change.
Fair. Yeah, it's not as obvious as with Fitz.
Yeah. Because like I said, there are a lot of things in play. There's a lot of movement going on in the world, a lot of pivotal decisions to be made. So which one do you attach yourself to? Which one is the most important out of the three pivotal plot lines?
Right. And I guess also just thinking about that scene in the final trilogy where B meets Beloved in the marketplace and suddenly can see all of the strings, and every single person has strings of events where if you just nudge them this way, these things happen, and if you don't, these things happen. And how do you justify which string to choose? And if that's what Beloved sees all of the time with every person, it would be really hard to figure out which weave to go with and which thread to pull.
Yeah. But with Fitz, like, that choice is already made, right? It's already like, look at Fitz, he's branching from every single decision he makes. So just guide him. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting conversation because it's an insight into Amber's thought process, her self-doubt creeping in right now. It's like, did I make the right decision? Did I doom all of the world for what I think is the best future because I stuck with the wrong person?
Right.
And Althea, of course, doesn't know what's going on.
No.
Malta? What does Malta have to do with this?
Fair.
But remember, Amber doesn't know that there's another log.
That's true.
She doesn't know that a dragon is talking to Malta.
Right.
And to Rain.
Yeah.
So if she would have known that, maybe Amber would have stayed behind.
Absolutely would have stayed behind.
Yeah.
Although I don't know, because I think her love for Paragon might have, I don't know, made it not as easy of a decision.
And if she didn't go along, Paragon wouldn't have been carved. Amber wouldn't have gotten the part of the treasure, probably.
That's true.
Which means that she wouldn't have gotten the rooster crown.
Little decisions.
Yeah, decisions.
Lots to think about.
Well, anyways, like I mentioned before, we jump over to Kennit's point of view, and they are sailing into Divvytown. And Genghis, the old sailor that is still with him, that was with him in the first chapter that we read of Kennit on Other Island, he is still around. He knocks on the door and says, "Hey, Captain, there's something real bad. I know Divvytown usually smells, but it smells real bad now."
Yeah.
And it smells like wet ashes. And Kennit takes a moment to readjust his senses and smells it. And he can very faintly scent that as well. It was the old smell of disaster, one he had not scented in a long time. Odd how a smell brought memories back sharper than any other prod to the senses. Screaming in the night and flowing blood, both slick and sticky. Flames lifting to the sky, nothing quite like the smell of burned houses mixed with death. "Thank you, Genghis. Tell Brig I'll be up shortly." Genghis had been very troubled in Kennit's eyes, and he knows that and can understand why, because Divvytown was as close to a home port as this crew had. They all knew what the smell meant, that raiders had been there, that Chalcidian slavers or Jamalian slavers had been there.
Right.
And I can surmise that, it's not spelled out here, but it's probably the satraps, Chalcidians, that came when they were sailing past.
Yeah, definitely, because that just happened. So yeah.
It's not, laid out there. There's no other clues to it as far as I can tell, but it's most likely scenario.
Right.
Kennit goes on to explain that, raiding was not an unusual event for a pirate town. But Divvytown had weathered that storm for a long time, and especially when, the old satrap was in his failing years and the incompetent Cosgo took over, there was a lull. But now that slavers are kind of picking up again and raiding, it's been a constant threat for all the pirate settlements, but Divvytown has been hidden for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's the oldest pirate town.
Yeah. They had learned both carelessness and prosperity. He had tried to warn them, but no one in Divvytown would listen to him. So now things have caught up. They're kind of spiraling and forcing the pirate settlements to act.
Right. It's kind of like with Bingtown, where things have gotten bad enough to where it's impossible to ignore the reality of the change in life.
The change finally came to them.
Yes.
To move the sleepy towns onward.
Yes. And as he's thinking about these changes that he warned them were going to happen, the charm speaks up, saying, "The circle is closing."
He glanced down at it and just ignores it, but thinking to himself it's more of a nuisance than anything. It's not luck anymore. It's just threats, warnings, and bleak prophecies. He wished he had never had it created, but he could scarcely get rid of it. There was far too much of himself in it to trust it if it fell into other hands. Likewise, to destroy a living sculpture of one's own face must invite a like destruction to oneself. So he continued to tolerate it. It might be useful one day, perhaps. I feel like we've talked about that before. Like, why didn't he just get rid of it?
Yeah.
And there it is spelled out. I forgot about this little paragraph, but of course, paranoid Kennit is like, 1, it's superstitious to destroy your own likeness.
Right.
That's bad. 2, I paid a lot of money for it, so maybe it'll be useful. But 3, there's way too much of myself to trust it in anyone else's hands.
Right. And there's a chance if he stops wearing it, it will go to somebody else's hands.
Right.
So, yeah. And I think it's really interesting once again to be reminded that Kennit is very superstitious.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as though we don't know that with his whole luck stuff, but he is very into believing that things are the way that they are, which is funny that he then crushed something on another island without thinking about it. Like, that superstition didn't get to him, but maybe that's what caused him to become more superstitious about destroying things.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I found it really interesting that Kennit says the charm is giving bleak prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Kennit's charm able to see the future? Is it able to see the future? I was
just going to say, we don't know. To Kennit, maybe it seems like that.
Yeah.
But also, kind of attached to the skill, kind of seeing things. I think it's just kind of messing with Kennit in a lot of things. But also, we've talked ad nauseum about the charm and the abilities of the charm. And I still feel like we've gone in circles about our decisions regarding the charm. It seemed so out of place in a lot of instances. And like Deus Ex Machina, where it's just kind of has the right things to say to push the plot along just because it seems like a magical item, Right. It doesn't fully fit in with everything that we know. But I don't know. It's I
guess, yeah, I was thinking about this before coming into the recording, and I feel as though a lot of the times when the charm gives a prophecy in quotation marks, or tells Kennit something that ends up helping Kennit, it's more just the charm telling Kennit to act like a normal human being for 1 second and not like a psychopath that doesn't have feelings. And so maybe it isn't telling the future or luck. It's just like, hey, psycho, not everybody thinks the way you do.
Right.
Maybe take a chill pill. And in that like brief moment of pause of what does that mean? It works out because the charm is right and more human than Kennit in some weird way. And so I don't know. And maybe the charm feels bad for Kennit. I don't know.
I think he just hates Kennit more so. But Bleak Prophecies here could relate to this conversation itself.
Right.
Because the charm speaks back up saying, hey, are you ignoring me? Or, well, he says, are you deaf? I said the circle closes. Do you not take my meaning? Kennit says, I was ignoring you. And kind of, he continues that the circle seems to be composed of several elements. A pirate captain, a live ship for the taking, a burned town, a captive boy, family to the ship. Those were the elements of the first cycle, and now what do we have here? A pirate captain, a live ship for the taking, a captive boy, family to the ship, and a burned town. Your analogy breaks down, Charm. The elements are out of order. I still find the coincidence compelling. What other elements could we add? How about a father held in chains? Kennit twisted his wrist so that the charm faced him. Or a woman with her tongue cut out. I could arrange one of those as well. The tiny face narrowed its eyes at him. It goes around, you fool. It goes around. Do you think that, once you have set the grindstone in motion, you can escape your ultimate fate? It was destined for you years ago. When you chose to follow in Ygritte's footsteps, you will die Ygritte's death. He slammed the charm face down on his table. I will not hear the name from you again. Do you understand me? And the charm goes blank. So we have a bit to talk about there. And during that conversation, before the charm spoke up, Kennit kind of was reflecting on the burned Divvytown, saying that he felt a pang of regret because he just dropped off his richest trove, and I'm sure Sincure Felden's family all died and burned, and there's no money to be made anymore.
Right.
We just see, callous Kennit.
Yeah, he's upset that he's wasted his time coming here.
And the only thing that sparks that emotion is Ygritte and the bleak prophecies that the charm is espousing.
Right.
But yeah, we have the elements for the circle, and I want to talk about like the circle that the charm is mentioning. One thing I want to mention before we get into, there is an abuse myth, like the circle of abuse.
Right.
That, people have talked about for years leading up to, I don't know, some point probably in the 2000s. It was debunked. It does not actually happen. It is a myth that people talk about. Abused people don't always go on to abuse other people.
Yes.
That is not, a thing.
Right. That's not a guaranteed outcome of being abused.
Right. However, in this book itself, it's not just that that is kind of brought up. It's kind of it's a whole metaphysical aspect of this world, right? There is the history repeats itself, white prophet, foundation of things. There is this circular motion of time that unless it's shifted out of its path by different choices, it will be doomed to repeat itself and maybe spin into darker areas.
Right.
That is the whole philosophy of the white prophets. And that's what I think the charm is mentioning here, that Kennit kind of fated himself to take after Ygritte because he was so obsessed with removing Ygritte's name that he stepped into Ygritte's shoes to erase Ygritte's name and replace it with his own. Right. And in his mind, he's like, I'm going to be better than Ygritte. I'm going to remove Ygritte as this famous pirate because I'm going to be the pirate king. I will erase Ygritte's name. So I need to do every famed thing that Ygritte did without the bad stuff.
Right. Which is really interesting because I think part of me, my natural reaction was, well, he is better than Ygritte. But then I really thought about it and no, I don't think he is. He is still just as ruthless. He still murders and kills and pillages. And is horrible on the inside. I guess we don't know. We've never seen Ygritte. We don't know how Ygritte thought or what he did, but it feels as though Ygritte probably also did things that weren't evil, like Kennit. Obviously Kennit is better at appearing benevolent,
right?
But I don't think Ygritte could have possibly always been this big, evil, bad, scary pirate. I think that's how
he's a human, right? It's not. Everything in this world that Robin Hobb writes is not black and white.
Yes.
However, everything that we see of Ygritte is straight black.
Yes, but I think that's because everything we see of Ygritte is from Kennit's point of view.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, it's that scared little boy who was abused and controlled by this scary, evil pirate.
And don't get us wrong. Ygritte literally abused Kennit, the small boy, to death multiple times.
Right.
Like, he is an awful, awful person.
No, there's no doubt about that. Ygritte is evil and the worst, and I'm not trying to say that he's actually a nice guy.
Right.
But I think it is fair to point out that the reasons that we may think Kennit is better aren't necessarily things that are that different from Ygritte, because we don't know what Ygritte did in the community. We don't know how he acted to his crew, to people he wasn't straight up abusing.
Right.
We just don't know that aspect. And so it's easy to think, well, even though we know Kennit is a total jerk to everyone inside his mind, he still gives good advice and still seems kind when he wants to. There's no denying that maybe Ygritte was the same. He was also manipulative.
Right. And we kind of know that too, because Ygritte, brokered a deal between him and Lucky Ludluck, Kennit's father. They're like, hey, we'll partner up. We'll be great friends together. They were feasting, and that's when he took over the island.
Yeah.
So, like, he was charismatic. He was convincing. And that's kind of what Kennit has turned into. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like, yeah, we totally understand. Both Emma and I totally understand. Ygritte is awful evil. But is Kennit better than him?
No, yeah, I think that's the point, is that, like you said, Robin Hobb doesn't really write at least very many one-dimensional characters.
Right.
And so it's pretty easy with her level of writing to realize that there is probably more to Ygritte than we are shown, because Kennit is our unreliable narrator.
Yeah. Literally all of the narrators that we get in all of these books are unreliable because they have their own biases.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I just think that's a really interesting thing to think on, of when we talk about Kennit stepping into Ygritte's shoes. And I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking, well, Kennit's better than Ygritte. Is he?
He's making more demonstrable changes to the Pirate Isle and more good, but it's the right time to do that, right?
Right.
So,
and
I don't know.
It's not like he's doing it out of the kindness of his heart. Right. He's not doing it because he is a good person deep down.
Ultimately, I think where his story ends off, he does do more good than Ygritte, of course. Like, that's kind of undeniable. He turns a nation of people and freed slaves into an actual nation of people.
Right.
And gives them their freedom to, do business as they please. However, that's not really Kennit's goal. So.
No, Kennit just wants to be in power. Because he knows better than everybody else, and he wants them to listen to him.
Yeah. So this cycle is very interesting to talk about, because the charm brings up, the same elements. And, the pirate captain, a live ship for the taking, a burned town, a captive boy, family to the ship. And Kennit doesn't want to see the similarities here.
Right.
And he just, brings up to shut up the charm. A woman with her tongue cut out could be the same, because Kennit knows that the charm is soft on Edda.
Right.
And I don't know if he's seriously proposing that, but if it would shut the charm up about it, I don't doubt that he would do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's interesting to compare the two and see, where the charm is coming from, and also Kennit's reluctance to see any similarities between him and the past.
Right. And I think, too, the choices that he has made does perpetuate this cycle that the charm is calling out of not stepping away from being ignorant, of not like you have to be better, but then you've set the wheel in motion. There's no getting out of it now.
Kennit willingly became a pirate captain. He, fostered a mutiny to do so. He willingly and, devoutly pursued a live ship to have as his main ship. He, coming into a burned town now, which is, there's lots of burned towns around the Pirate Isles, so that's not really, a strong link there, charm. But then he willingly took on a captive boy because the charm said something and it reminded him of him being taken by Ygritte, and he thought there was a link there. So he's just stepping into the role himself.
Right. Chaining willingly up the boy's father to get rid of him. And
yeah, I don't know. Interesting thing to talk about, but he does shut the charm up by yelling at him and slamming the charm down to a desk and, drawing blood on his own wrist. And enough thinking about the past in Kennit's mind.
Right.
Enough thinking about Ygritte, never talk about Ygritte again to me, kind of deal.
Fair enough.
So he heads out, he gets himself, dressed and heads out. The stench was much stronger on the deck. The swampy harbor of Divvytown had always had a stink of its own. Now the smells of burned homes and death joined it. An uncommon silence had fallen over his crew. The Vivacia moved like a ghost ship, pushed slowly by a faint wind over the sluggish water. No one cried out, nor whispered, or even moaned. The terrible silence of acceptance weighed the ship down. Even the figurehead was silent. Behind them, in their wake, the Marietta came in a similar pall. Kennit looks around and his eyes went to Wintrow, who is, just staring with Vivacia, and he can almost feel the numbness coming from them. Etta was beside Wintrow, gripping the rail and leaning forward as if she were the ship's figurehead. Her face was frozen in a strange grimace of disbelief. So this is a scene of utter destruction. There is one wall of Bethel's Bagnio standing. There are homes that are completely burned down, some that are kind of standing, warehouses that are gone. They came in here and indiscriminately burned and took slaves and killed people. And for almost all of them, this was home.
Right.
And this is from Kennit's point of view, and it still has a somber quality to the writing. If this was from anyone else's, this would be
devastating.
The worst nightmare, right? This is where they came to dock. This is their home port. This is Divvytown. For all of them, probably, Divvytown has been around since they were alive.
Right.
And that is unheard of in pirate settlements, really. So they are slowly drifting in, and there's no one moving. There's no one around. There's no sign of life to Divvytown right now. There's muck on the beach and, an overlay of greenish algae. There's wet ash all around, no sign of life, and there's nothing going on.
Right.
But an instant later, someone says, hey, there's life. And Kennit looks over and eventually sees somebody. A man stood in the open door holding a sword defiantly. His head was bound in a dirty brown bandage. They're about to, leave when they see that. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, we'll stay. We'll see what's going on. Kennit wanted to leave initially. He just wanted to get out. Said, there's no point in tying up here. We'll go somewhere else to sell our stuff. But when there's signs of life, he can't really leave at that point. So they tie up, and both Etta and the boy, Wintrow, insist that they're going to go with him to shore. So they get their small boats out, and there's a similar small boat from the Marietta with Sorkor and a few choice sailors going to shore as well. There are some survivors gathering out. They're coming out of the woodworks here, and they had gathered into a crowd before either gig touched the shore. They stood like ragged, silent ghosts waiting for the pirates to land. Their silence seemed ominous to Kennit, as did the way he felt every pair of eyes follow him. The boat nudged suddenly into the mucky shoreline. He sat still, his hands gripping his crutch as the crew jumped out and dragged the boat further up. He did not like this one bit. The shining muck of the beach was black, and his crutch and his peg were bound to sink into the muck as soon as he got out of the boat. He was going to look very awkward. Worse, he would be vulnerable if the crowd decided to rush him. He remained seated, staring over the crowd and waiting for some definite sign of their temperament. Then, from the Marietta's boat, he heard Sorkor exclaim, "Alyssum, you're alive!" The burly pirate was instantly over the side, sloshing through the water, charging the waiting crowd, and it parted before his charge. He seized a shrinking girl in his arms and swept her to his barrel chest. It took Kennit a moment to recognize her. The bedraggled creature had been much more fetching when Sinkior Falden had presented her and her sister Lily as prospective brides for Kennit and Sorkor. He recalled that Sorkor had seemed infatuated with the girls, but he had never suspected that he had continued the courtship. He sees that Sorkor was hugging her and she was hugging him back, so he decides that maybe it's all right if I get out of my boat.
Right.
So the girl was glad to see him. Kennit decided it was safe.
Right. And then I feel like we see a little bit of a human side of Kennit in this, because he demands Wintrow help him, but then internally says the boy looked really pale. It would be good to give him something to do.
Right.
Which is very kind of him, I feel like, almost uncharacteristically so.
Wintrow replies, "The whole town is gone," he said stupidly as he climbed over the side and held out his arm to the pirate. "Some might think that an improvement," the pirate captain observed. He steps over the side, and as he fears, his peg goes down, but Etta also is there to catch him, and he gets to a rocky outcropping and can set on solid ground a little bit, at least. He looks around, finally, observing everything, and sees that the devastation had been thorough. The raid had likely been weeks ago, but there was no sign that anyone had tried to rebuild it. They were right. It was pointless. Once the slavers had discovered a settlement, they would return again and again until they had harvested every person there. Divvytown, one of the oldest of the pirate settlements, was dead. He shook his head to himself. I don't know how many times I told them they needed to put up 2 watchtowers and some ballista. Even 1 tower with a watchman would have given them enough warning that they could have fled. But no one would listen to me. All they could worry about was who was going to pay for it. It was satisfying to have been so right, and no one could argue that he had not warned them. Usually his suggestions had been met with mockery, or the accusation that he just wanted to gather power to himself. Yet several of the survivors turned to him with accusing eyes. You are responsible," as he points at Kennit. "You brought the Chalcedeans down on us." So there's a place to direct the anger of losing your home now.
Right.
And it's the person who incited the Chalcedean slavers by raiding them all the time.
Yes.
Flaunting his power and saying like, "Ha ha ha, I'm freeing all your slaves."
Right. And also, I think the fact that he just basically looks at all this destruction and goes, "Told you so."
Right.
Doesn't really help his case that people are angry and are blaming him.
And now he is yelling back, basically saying, I am not to blame. You guys are. I told you so many times. Who knows? You might have been able to defeat the raiders and seize their ships. I am the least to blame for what happened here. If you wish to blame anyone, blame your own pig-headed stubbornness. It was the wrong tone to take. Almost instantly, Kennit knew that. Too late. And the crowd, incensed by the angry retort, rushes at them. And Kennit's like, I'm going to die.
Great. And then he's angry because Etta has loosened her grip on him. But then he realizes it's because she is getting into stance with her knives out to protect him.
Yep. And he waves, Wintrow away because Kennit was grabbing his own knife. But he was shocked beyond words when the boy also drew a knife, a very valuable knife indeed, and stepped in front of him. Beside him, Etta gasped and then gave a snort of amusement. A glance at her showed a wild, proud smile dawning on her face. It was perhaps the most frightening sight Kennit had ever seen. Well, he knew that she enjoyed cutting up men. At least she was on his side this time. There are some other, sailors who are behind them, coming up behind them. They go back to back because the crowd starts surrounding Kennit and crew.
He also notes that Vivacia has been shouting something and more crew are starting to come to shore, but he's pretty confident that it'll be too late by then and it doesn't really matter. But these people are all idiots because they're not going to get anything out of killing him.
Right.
His ship will flee.
The tavern man, the man who was very angry and yelled at Kennit, Bodge, is kind of in the front there. He's carrying a cudgel. Kennit glances over to the side and sees Sorkor standing in the crowd with the girl still. And he makes eye contact, and he knows that Sorkor will cut his way to him. They don't even need to have a signal or anything. He just knows that that's the case. And Bodge is kind of glancing around, seeing at his followers, seeing, how far this is going to go.
Right. Because nobody's making the first move. Right. Nobody really wants to be the one that starts the fight.
And Bodge looks over Wintrow's head and addresses Kennit. It is your fault, you scummy bastard. You're the one that stirred things up, pirating slave ships. Had to show off. You couldn't be content with just making a living. You and your talk of being a king. A ship here, a ship there. That boy with a crown in Jamalia didn't care. Not until you come along. The satrap was leaving us alone until you stirred the pot. You got into his pocket personal. Now look what you've done to us. We've got nothing left. We're going to have to find a new place and rebuild from the ground up. You owe us, is how I see it. Whatever you got on that ship, we're taking. So we can find ourselves a new hiding spot. Choose now how we get it. If you don't want to share easy, well. He's swinging the cudgel around, threatening. There's more folk that are emerging from the trees as well, and plainly there are more survivors than Kennit thought initially. But this whole confrontation was a foolish one. Like you said, Emma, he's like, okay, they'll kill me, but then the ships will just flee. They won't stick around, so you won't get anything. And he's thinking about this, and he's smiling, composing his words, and then all of a sudden, hiding. Is that all you can think of? The sound of Wintrow's voice shocked Kennit. It rang out, clear as a bard's, laden with contempt, and pitched, Kennit realized, to reach not just the men in front of him, but those coming in from the jungle as well. Wintrow still held his knife low and ready. Where had he learned that? But the boy obviously had other intentions than fighting the crowd. Shut up, kid. No one has the time for more talk. Well, King Kennit, easy or... Of course you have no time for talk. Wintrow's voice rang clear over Bodge's. Talk would require brains, not brawn. No one here ever has the time for talk, not even when it would have saved you. Kennit tried to show you. You can't hide from what is happening outside your little town. Sooner or later, the rest of the world catches up with you. Kennit tried to warn you. He told you to fortify the town, but you wouldn't listen. He brought slaves here and set them free amongst you, but you would not look at them and see yourselves. No, you'd rather hide here in the muck like some garbage-eating crab and trust that the world will never take notice of you. It doesn't work that way. If you'd listen to him now, you'd find out how to be men again. I've seen the sketches in his room. This harbor could be fortified. Divvytown could declare itself. And he lists through all of these changes and says, but no, all you want to do is splatter some more brains, work some more death, and then go hide under another rock until the satrap's raiders dig you out again. The boy had run out of breath. Kennit hoped the others could not see his trembling. He pitched his voice low as if for Wintrow alone, but he knew his words would carry. Give it up, son. They wouldn't listen to me. They won't listen to you. This is all they know, fighting and hiding. I've done what I could to try to teach them to be free men. He shrugged one shoulder. They'll do what they'll do. And he looks around and at the crowd and sees former slaves that he had freed, recognizes people, and they're kind of avoiding his eyes a little bit here. Mm-hmm. And some of them say, I'm with Kennit, and step over. Kennit really knows how to play up his showmanship here. He knows how to play a scene. He takes advantage of Wintrow finally speaking up for him. And Wintrow has had enough, right? Like, he's been on the fence for a long time. He knows Kennit isn't doing amazing things, but his results speak for themselves. He is freeing slaves. He has been on the fence about that. right? His methods are death and destruction, but he's freeing more people.
Right.
And finally, he goes into Divvytown, a place that, yes, he has heard from Kennit's voice and from his own plans of like, hey, we should save these people. We should make an actual town, which is noble in Wintrow's eyes. And they finally sail back to Divvytown. And like I said, the change has come to them. And that hits Wintrow like a truck to the face, right? All these people want to do now is more killing and then go run away again. So he's finally seeing that Kennit's way is the best way.
Mm-hmm.
They need to stop being little grubby knives in the dark. They need to stop being these pirates. Maybe Kennit's way is pirating to free more people, but eventually they could become free men and not pirates anymore.
Right.
So why don't you listen to Kennit? So I'm going to speak up for Kennit here because you guys are awful, and at least he has a clear vision for the future.
Right. And it's not just killing and hiding again.
Right. And I think that's what really incensed him, because to Sa is the god of life, right? And to Wintrow, like, that was what was conflicting him with Kennit, is he's still killing people. He's still doing immoral things. But compared to what Divvytown wants to do, it's the lesser evil.
Right. Yeah. And clearly with people thinking that way, he can then realize, oh, maybe that is how you convince them with violence to teach them nonviolence.
Right. And so with those words and with Kennit, latching on to Wintrow's words and playing into it, like all they know is fighting and hiding. I tried to teach them to be free men, but they can't see it. And he looks around at the slaves who he freed, and they're like, okay, we're with Kennit then. And Alyssum yells from the side saying like, hey, shame on all of you, names a few people. They tried their hardest to help us. Kennit tried his hardest. What did my mother tell you? That they were men who saw how the future could be when you were making fun of us, latching ourselves to these two madmen. Men who were trying to help us be more than a village on the edge of nothing, and now she is dead, and Kennit didn't kill her, our stupidity did. We would not listen to him. We needed a king to protect us, but we mocked his offer. So Kennit is kind of looking around. He still thinks that he is going to die, right? Mm-hmm. His back is like soaked with perspiration. But if they can delay long enough, the sailors that were coming off of the ships might be able to get there to turn the tide.
Exactly. So he just needs to hold it off a few more minutes.
And it's not as clear as things were at the beginning. More people have come over to their side to help defend, but there's still an angry mob surrounding them. It's not, cut and dry, Kennit is going to die now, but it's just most likely he's going to die now. But that's also paranoid Kennit saying, right?
Right. And he says the woman and the boy, they would stop a few, but eventually they'd press in.
Mm-hmm. Some of the folk in the back of the crowd were standing more loosely. They had stepped slightly apart from their fellows and struck poses more listening than threatening. Bodge was not one of them. He and the 5 or so men standing closest to him stood with their shoulders raised and elbows out, gripping their weapons hard. The resistance from the other survivors only seemed to inflame Bodge's anger. "You're wrong," he roared suddenly. "It's his fault. His fault. He brought them down on us." And he leaped forward, cudgel swinging. The crowd behind him was suddenly in motion, swinging forward like a wave. And so there is a fight. Bodge swings his cudgel towards Wintrow. Wintrow ducks, but not quite far enough, and gets kind of clipped. Kennit thinks that, Wintrow is down then. And there's also a young tough, a young villager engaging Etta, so she'd be no help. So Kennit is going to have to face Bodge, but then all of a sudden, Wintrow suddenly sprang up against Bodge in between them. Like a sapling blown to one side, but not snapped, the boy swept back to his stance. The shock showed plain on Bodge's face, but the fool had already drawn his cudgel back for a blow intended to kill Kennit. His chest was wide open. No doubt the tavern keeper was accustomed to a bar between himself and his victim. Wintrow's knife slammed into the man, punching through his shirt and vest and into his hard belly. Wintrow screamed as he did it, a cry of both horror and hate. Bodge roared, injured but far from dead. Sorkor is cutting through the side. Kennit kind of can hear, and Kennit then wades into the fight. He goes to Wintrow first. He helps him out. Eventually, with a solid smack to Wintrow's arm and Wintrow's yell of pain. Kennit reaches him and they kill Bodge. And then he goes over to Edda to help Edda because she is in the muck with this man trying to drive a knife into her and she's trying to hold back with 2 hands. He goes over and helps her as well. It's a very chaotic fight, but as soon as it starts, it kind of calms down.
Yeah. Also, I found it really interesting that instead of just fighting other people off, he saves Wintrow and Edda.
I know. Yeah.
Again, I feel like it shows a little bit of that underlying feeling for the two of them that he can't acknowledge, and not in a like pedophile way with Wintrow or like in a, it's not in that way. Just
there's a human
care.
bond there.
Yeah. This care that he has for the two of them, even though we see him more as somebody who doesn't really have feelings at all.
And this kind of plays into that the users, I don't remember if it was an email or whatever, but the luck is just his compassion showing through.
Yeah.
It's a very small example that, it could be related to that. But him saving Wintrow and Edda really help out his cause in their eyes, right? Especially Wintrow's eyes.
Right.
Because... yes, this is the man I threw everything behind and he came and saved me.
Right.
And then Wintrow, later on in this chapter, really speaks up for Kennit and really becomes his prophet.
Yes.
So to speak.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of nice to see that side of Kennit because he is so evil, I guess, that it's like nice to see him do something good, even if he can't acknowledge why he's doing it or that it is a good thing that he's doing.
Right. I mean, in his eyes, he has a peg leg. There's muck all around. Those are the 2 people he could reach the closest, right? That's going to be his excuses. Like, that's all I could do, really.
Right. But he could have just stayed out of it.
Yeah, he could have just stayed still.
Let them continue to fight and die for him. And instead he helps. And I think that's pretty big. I mean, obviously he did also murder 2 people, but isn't it so sweet?
He's covered in mud. He fell to the ground. It was too humiliating because Edda is scrabbling to her feet, crying out, "Kennit, Kennit." She's standing over him protectively with a knife, and Kennit is struggling to stand. Somehow, Sorkor had contrived to cut through the thick of it as usual. As Kennit lost his balance and sat back in the mud, Sorkor casually dispatched a wounded Divvytown man, stepped across the remaining space between them, and, grasps his shirt and pulls him up. Edda found his crutch and offered it to him. It, too, was thick with muck. He accepted the filthy thing and tried to look nonchalant as he tucked it under his arm. At his feet, Wintrow had managed to get as far as his knees. In his right arm, he cradled his left, but he still gripped his knife as well. This Edda noticed, and she gave a proud laugh. Heedless of his moan, she seized him by the back of his shirt and hauled him upright. To Kennit's surprise, she gave the boy a rough hug. "You didn't do too badly for your first time. Next time, duck deeper." "I think my arm is broken." "Let me see." And she, grabs his arm with both hands and feels up it, and he jerks back and cries out in pain. He's like, "Why'd you do that?" He's like, "Well, it's not broken, because if it was broken, you'd have passed out."
Right, which, maybe not the time then.
She says, "It might be a bit cracked, though. You'll get over it." "Help me get to firmer ground," Kennit demanded. But it was Sorkor who took his arm and helped him along. Edda and Wintrow followed together. For an instant, that rankled. Then he reminded himself that it was his intention to throw Edda and Wintrow together. So, a little bit jealous of, not all the attention being on him. But again, he has to remind himself, okay, fine. That's what I wanted.
But is that why he's upset? Is it the attention? Or is it Edda and Wintrow maybe getting along and not liking him?
Maybe in his eyes, that's what it is. We know it's that's not what it is.
Right.
Because they both like him.
Yes, but I mean, in this moment, it's jealousy. It's just simple
jealousy.
That's
what I said. Yeah.
But you're saying it as like he's not the center of attention. That's why he's upset. I don't think it's not being the center of attention. I think it's the fact that maybe they like him or they don't like him as much as they like each other in like a relationship sense, not like
maybe
I'm your ruler and leader. I think it's more human side of him of
maybe.
Hey, you're supposed to like me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just a thought.
Could be. They're passing a lot of the results of the fight here. Not a lot of his crewmen are that injured, which, the results of the fight are not surprising to Kennit because the crew was fed and well trained,
right?
And the villagers were not. But also the delay and the getting people on their side really helped them out in the numbers thing and having Kennit not die initially. So they get to firmer ground here. And Kennit is kind of taking a look. He sees the crewmen who are encircling him protectively and glances past them. He sees that there's basically nothing left to Divvytown. Nowhere to take a bath, nowhere to have a quiet drink, nowhere to sell his booty. No point in staying. He says, let's get out of here. There's a man in Bull Creek with a link to Candletown. Last time we were there, he was bragging he could get us better prices for our swag. Maybe we'll try a bit with him. Sir, agreed Sorkor, and hangs his head and says, Sir, I'm taking a listen. If you must, Kennit replied in some annoyance. When the big man lifted his head, there were glints of anger deep in his eyes. And of course you must, Kennit amended hastily, shaking his own head sadly. For what is left of for the poor girl here? You're the only protector she has now, Sorkor. I see it as your duty. You must. Sorkor was nodding gravely. Just as I saw it myself, sir. We've really taken a back seat with Sorkor in the last book because he's been on a different ship now. But Kennit is still keeping him close and trying to keep him placated,
right,
and manipulated to be his right hand. And Sorkor, as we saw in the first book and a little bit at the beginning of the second, he was starting to be in on the plan and see himself more as an equal to Kennit because Kennit let him in at that level. Kennit didn't like that, of course, but now he has to keep Sorkor close and happy.
Right, exactly.
He says, let's go. There's nothing left for us here. And no one looked prone to attack as he looks around at the villagers, but one person does speak up and says, you're leaving us here like this? How else would I leave you? Kennit demanded. Again, Wintrow surprised him. You've made it very apparent he's not welcome here. Why should he waste his time on you? The voice sounded sincerely disdainful. It wasn't us that jumped him. It was them other troublemakers, and they're all dead now. Why should we be punished for what they done? It also wasn't you that jumped in to save him. That shows you have learned nothing. Nothing! You still believed that the evil that befalls another is nothing to you. Let another man be taken slave. Let another town be raided. Let someone else be slaughtered on the beach right in front of you. It won't matter to you until it's your own throat being slit, and we haven't time to wait for that. Other towns are glad to listen to what he says, glad to profit from his leadership. Divvytown is dead. It was never on a chart, and it never will be, because the people in it are already dead. The boy's voice had a power to it. The very people he was reviling drew closer, moving as if drawn in like fish on lines. Some scowled and some looked shamed. Some still wore the dazed look of people whose bodies had survived some widespread disaster while their minds fled. They came toward the boy. Even stranger, the men of the crew parted to let Wintrow stand before his audience unblocked. When the boy fell silent, the quiet that followed his words echoed his accusation. Other towns? Someone finally asked. Other towns, Wintrow confirmed. Towns like Askew. They took the ship that Kennit gave them and put it to use. With the wealth that came in, they bettered the lot of all. They no longer hide, but venture out and declare to the world that they are there and they are free. They trade openly, and they challenge slave ships that seek pass. Unlike you, they took Kennit's words to heart. They fortify their harbor and live free. People are saying, that won't work for us. We can't stay here. They know where our town is. You must take us with you. That's our only hope. What else are we to do? What else? Wintrow mused. And he looks around as if to Kennit, mentally comparing to something else, and points at something and says, there. That is the spot where you could start. You rebuild, but you begin with a tower there. It need not be very tall to command a view of the lagoon. And he kind of suggests, build a watchtower. Someone speaks up, like, oh, you saying that we rebuild Divvytown? With what? And Wintrow is looking around and says some things, there are some things you can salvage here. Must I spell out everything for you?
Also, he points out, you have better prospects elsewhere.
Right, right. He's like, cut trees down to, season for lumber, reuse the sunken ships, reuse things that you can, make your stand here. Was that not your home? Why are you allowing them to drive you from it? Rebuild, but this time, do it right, with forethought for defense, for trade, for clean water. The docks should never have been built here. They should run out from there. You give your best ground to the warehouses. Put your homes and businesses there and build the warehouses on pilings over there where a ship can come up right to the door. It was all in Kennit's plans. He saw it clearly. I cannot believe that you did not ever see it for yourselves. Kennit is looking around and seeing that people are taking this to heart because there's nothing more enticing than starting new.
Right.
Starting life over. And people are kind of seeing opportunity here. And they're getting a little sly look and there's like, oh, we weren't rich before, but now we're on all equal footing here.
Right.
He would wager that whoever had owned the ships had been dragged off in chains, so someone would be smart enough to claim what was left. And Kennit remarks that Wintrow raised his voice like a prophet, proclaiming, Kennit is a good man who has always cared for you, even when you spurned his offers of help. You have never been far from his heart. I doubted his motives at first. I feared him, but I can tell you this now. I have seen into his heart, and I believe now what he believes. Sa has put a destiny upon him. Kennit will be king of the Pirate Isles. Will you be one of his cities, or will you vanish? Kennit's ears rang. He could not believe for an instant what he was hearing. Then his heart seized it. The boy was his prophet. Sa had sent him Wintrow, a priest of his own, to open the eyes of others to his destiny. That was what he had felt when he had first set eyes on the lad. The connection of king to soothsayer had linked them. It was not, as the charm had accused, some brutish urge to repeat the past. Wintrow was his prophet, his luck embodied. Even stranger events followed as the miracle unfolded, and people claim, I'm staying here.
The boy's right.
Yep.
We can't be free until we stop hiding.
Yeah. I was a slave. I thought I was free, just, not having shackles, but I was still in shackles, hiding and running from Jamalia. I have to claim a whole new life in order to be truly free.
Right.
Man, Wintrow is really making a choice here.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked by the level of devotion that Wintrow has for Kennit at this point. Because I feel like last chapter he was still a little skeptical of him.
I think it's a bunch of, it's a combination of things, right? They're doing their victory tour right now.
Right.
Seeing all the villages that are praising him, that are prospering, that have new growth, he's appointing teachers. And yes, Wintrow is skeptical of his motives behind that. And, what are they doing? Giving him profit when Kennit just gives it back and tells him how to use it?
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. Vivacia is helping try to convince Wintrow of the good that Kennit is doing. So it's a combination of him not being around such people who are opposed to Kennit's vision, and him being like, oh, Kennit is good, is he bad? And then all of a sudden being confronted with, these people don't want to listen to somebody who is actively trying to help other communities.
Right.
And they are still saying, like, let's kill him. He's to blame for everything. When now compared to what devastation is in front of him and the view of people not listening to Kennit, what that gets them, Wintrow's all of a sudden seeing these slavers, these Chalcedeans are the ultimate evil people should be banding against, like Kennit has been saying all along.
Right.
So I think he's finally kind of come to terms with the lesser evil here that I think is evil.
Right.
The lesser, even if his motives are bad, the ends justify the means to get there. So I think that's kind of what he's kind of come around to. I mean, Vivacia's probably been working on it for a long time. Edda is devoted to Kennit, and he has a huge crush on Edda. All these people are surrounding and believe in Kennit, so why can't he see it when confronted with the harsh reality of people not listening to Kennit?
Fair enough, yeah.
And I don't know. The only thing I really can't shape up is the all of a sudden proclaiming Sa did give him a destiny to be king, right?
Yeah, this is Sa's choice.
Yeah. And I get it. His belief is that Sa sets a path for everyone. And maybe this is Kennit's path that Sa set out. Maybe I can see Wintrow believing that. It's just all of a sudden to proclaim him as like, this is Sa's destiny for him. This is a godly given right for Kennit to be king. It's a big leap there, but I understand his thought process in taking Kennit's side in this. I don't know. It is out of nowhere, but I think the evidence kind of leads up to that point.
Okay, yeah.
He's arguing very, very fervently in his favor, though.
Yes, and not just that, but he turns and looks up at Kennit with such admiration that it almost blinds the pirate.
Yeah. For an instant, he truly felt something, a pang of some emotion so sharp he could not tell if it was pain or love. His throat closed. When he did speak, his words came out softly, and folk drew near still to hear him. He felt like a holy man. No, like a wise and beloved king. He smiled down on his people. You have to do it together. It cannot be every man for himself. Begin with the tower, yes, but at its foot raise a shelter that all can share until your homes are restored. Dig for your water instead of taking it from the slough. He looked around at the faces of the folk listening to him. They came to him like lost, bedraggled children. They were finally ready to hear him. He could correct their lives for them. They would let him show them how they should live. His heart swelled with triumph. He turned to Edda at his side. Says to her, Go back to Vivacia to my stateroom. Bring the plans from my desk. They are labeled clearly. Do you know the ones I mean? I can find them. I can read, she pointed out gently. She touched his arm briefly, her smile warm, and then turns to commandeer the two men and row the boat back. So he calls back to her like, hey, make sure they know that we're going to stay here for a while. We're going to help rebuild Divvytown. So he is feeling benevolent. He is triumphant. He is feeling some sort of pain or love in his chest from the gratitude, the admiration that Wintrow is showing him, and that the people are finally listening. They're finally ready to follow him. It's kind of a culmination of his dreams for a while. And this is, the first strong emotion besides hatred that he's felt in a long time, or paranoia.
Right. And they're staying. They're going to help. He says the Marietta has wheat on board. Go bring that back because these people are probably hungry.
Yeah, exactly. A woman offers, use of her house because it has running water still and it's mostly intact. And they're here for a while.
And Kennit accepts the use of her home. Mm-hmm. He smiles benevolently and says that would be wonderful.
Smiling down on his people.
His loyal subjects.
I read a lot of the last few pages there, and I feel like I've talked a lot, but I felt like that was a very important section to read a lot of, because there was a lot of nuance in what was being said rather than kind of talking about it. Especially Wintrow's speeches there.
Yeah.
And that is, the big news that comes from this chapter, right? It's Wintrow has the full change of heart. He is fully on board now. He's with the plan, and Kennit deciding here, hey, we're going to stay, feed the hungry people, we'll help them rebuild, probably solidifies that even further that he made the right choice.
Right. I don't know. It's really well done. I think it's interesting to see it from Kennit's point of view rather than Wintrow's point of view.
Right.
Because we can then...
I'm so curious about Wintrow's point of view.
I would love to know Wintrow's point of view in this. But I don't know. It's so interesting that Kennit has this almost kind of out-of-body experience for this.
Right.
Because for once, Kennit isn't the only one advocating for himself.
Yeah, and it's not Sorkor either.
And it's not Sorkor.
It's somebody who's eloquent.
Yes.
And can turn a crowd.
Yeah, and I think that's really part of Wintrow's value to Kennit, is that Wintrow is I don't know how to phrase this. Wintrow is like a high-class man.
He's educated. He's eloquent.
He's well-educated, and he is good at speaking.
And even more than that, he is very earnest.
Yeah.
In his beliefs. Because, Kennit knows that, and we know that.
Right.
He is so fervent and so hardcore when he believes something, he's all in.
True.
He has made his decision. He believes this is to be just. He's meditated on it. This is how it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to believe that 100%. He's not unwilling to change his mind on things.
Right.
But he's struggled so much with this that I think his mind will be at ease just picking a side.
Yes. Yeah, finally.
Right. So I think somebody with that belief and the eloquence you were talking about, the education, is such an asset to Kennit.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Kennit finally being like, he's my luck embodied.
Yes. Like, that's why I have connection with him. It's not right. It's not this underlying thing. It's for sure just because he's my luck. I needed him. This was my luck telling me to save him just for this moment.
And that's a little bit of, self-delusion there too.
Right.
Because we know, because we read it in this book, that he latched on and felt that connection with Wintrow because the charm said something about Ygritte.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not because his luck allowed this moment to happen. Although, I guess you could argue a little bit that it is.
Right.
But that's not the driving factor of why Wintrow's here.
Right, exactly. It's just kind of superstition stepping in and being like, this is why I am better than Ygritte.
I'm better than everyone.
See, it loops back. It loops back to that conversation that we had before. His luck steps in and being like, it's not because I need to be Ygritte or, slightly better. It's because my luck is leading me on the path to fulfill my dreams.
Right. And I find it really interesting that when Kennit is in a good mood, he's way more benevolent than normal.
Oh, yeah.
And just like...
Because things are going his way.
Exactly. I don't know. So which reinforces people doing things that please him.
Right.
Because it benefits them to do so. But it's really interesting to me that he's like, yes, I should be kind. This is what I do when I'm happy. I love being kind.
He was just ready to abandon everybody. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, what should we do then? And he's like, oh, they're my people and ready to listen.
My loyal subjects.
I will help them. I will feed them.
Yeah.
He's such a superiority complex about his way of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like his whole thing about, I read it out. Was it like, they're ready to listen to me teach them how to live their lives, show them how they could live, correct their lives for them. They're ready to listen. Oh, yeah, man. Granted, and this is the tough part about Kennit as a character. He's correct.
Yeah.
Like, that's the hard part about it. He is correct.
This is the whole thing that Wintrow struggles with of like, yeah, what he's doing is good, but he's such a bad person that like morally it feels wrong to root for him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting chapter.
Very.
And at the beginning, it's just kind of like thrown in as Althea's problems with half.
Right. Well, because I think we have to have that set up for later.
Yeah, that comes in a couple chapters here. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have thoughts on, Kennit, on the charm itself, if the charm has prophecy powers at all, we've talked about it a lot, but if you have any more thoughts about that, if you have thoughts about Wintrow's change of heart and if that makes sense for him, or on Half and how Althea thinks about her problems and her and Amber's inability to kind of see it from the optics point of view, please let us know. We want to hear your thoughts on this chapter overall, or on any chapters that you're currently reading, any books that you're currently reading. We like to hear from you in general. Please let us know by emailing us directly at isfitshappy@gmail.com, or messaging us, or commenting on any of our posts on any of our social medias. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Threads, on Instagram, on YouTube, and let us know what you're thinking. Thanks so much.
See you next week. Okay, now we get to talk about all the stuff you brought to our attention. So this week, we're going to start with some Facebook messages that we got, or replies, starting first with episode 189, a reply that we got from Ellen. And this was in response to our questioning how Devad knows that the satrap is coming and why he's already on board one of the important ships that's there to receive the satrap. And Ellen reminded us that whenever the pig's head is put into the chapter,
carriage,
the chapter where the pig head is in Devad's carriage, Devad is trying to show off to the Vestrits by insinuating that the satrap might be coming for a visit.
Yeah, and I had completely forgot about that. So thank you for the reminder, because that was literally probably 3 or 4 chapters before that.
Yes, but I feel like so much happens in these that it's really easy to forget stuff like that. So
confirmation, he did know he was coming. Don't know if he knew exactly when, but it seems like he had solid information.
Yeah.
So, he kind of knew something was up. And we had lots of comments for episode 190. Our last episode as well, about a couple things. First, I think we'll start with Dana attached a picture to one of these, and it's from an epigraph, just an excerpt that says the dust for the boxes,
dream boxes,
the dream boxes, was the wood ground to a dust and exchanged by lovers. It is said to allow to have them share dreams. So confirmation there from a different excerpt of the dust is ground up wizard wood.
Yes. Yeah, which is kind of cool that is something that is answered. Hobb has definitively said.
It's from chapter 28 of Fool's Fate. Well, also this is written in as an outsider perspective, right?
Yes.
Like rumors of this, and it's said to be this. But I think we can take that as pretty solid.
Right.
There are other stuff in that comment. I just wanted to start with that one because the other ones are mostly talking about Elderlings, the skill, and kind of my tangent of Rain.
Yes.
And how that kind of relates to Tintaglia and the connections there. Because it was a tangent / rant, I don't remember exactly everything I said. The general gist of it was that Rain is open to skill because he is kind of the one delving into the cities.
Right.
And that's why Tintaglia can kind of grasp onto his mind so easily, because he has more of a predilection for it, because he is the one who can decipher what's going on in that hidden city and can interpret things and figure out things easier. So that's kind of like the basis of where this starts.
Right. Yeah.
And we had like the comment from Dana about that is that it got Dana thinking about the Farseers as well, the comments about Rain and like the skill and Elderlings, because in Wisdom's time they had seemingly they had kind of an accord with Elderlings, whether that's just ancient history and Elderlings weren't real then or not, but it seems, according to tapestries and things, it seems like he actually discussed things with Elderlings.
Right. They had some sort of good relationship.
Right. Maybe that's kind of the deal that they had of fixing the children, because it kind of goes off of maybe Elderlings didn't have the skill,
right?
Kind of thought pattern. And Dana's like, maybe that's why Wisdom had good relations with the Elderlings, is because they made a deal to help fix their children while dragons were away.
Yeah.
And that's what Fitz does in the last trilogy. He kind of helps fix the abnormalities that the dragons are unable to correct because they're not nearby during that time. So it just kind of got Dana thinking about how maybe they had better communications than we previously thought because of, the skill stone in Buckkeep's basement. Maybe they had an easy way to travel.
Yeah.
And more communication than we thought in the past, which is an interesting, head theory.
Definitely. I really like it. Although it does raise the question that if King Wisdom was around while Elderlings were still around, first of all, wouldn't that mean dragons would have still been around?
Right.
Second of all,
they could have been dying at the time, and maybe that's why they needed the Farseer's help.
I suppose, but I was going to say, why wouldn't there be any mention of the destruction of the Elderling city?
Right, I know.
If they were truly around and walking, like living together, making deals, helping each other, wouldn't there be some record of the Elderling city collapsing? And
giant earth-shattering cataclysms usually have documents about them.
So that part feels odd to me. But also, Elderlings are depicted on the tapestry, which how would they know what the Elderlings look like? I guess they could have gone to the empty cities and...
Elderlings and dragons are depicted on different tapestries.
That's true. So maybe...
It's weird because it feels like kind of my headcanon is shaping up to be the cataclysm happened. Claris hunted and tried to kill all the dragons. And Elderlings. It didn't happen overnight. It's a long time happening. And cataclysms like that slowly, kill out food supplies so the dragons might starve, etc., etc. Maybe these Elderlings that King Wisdom met with were kind of the remnants after Kelsingra had collapsed. He still had to journey out beyond there, and they were living in some area, but they couldn't go into the city itself. And so that cataclysm wasn't a big deal because it didn't happen during their lifetimes, right?
Okay, sure.
They still needed help with, Dana's comment here, they still needed help fixing their abnormalities because dragons were dying out.
Right.
And they could get, descriptions of the dragons that artists could then draw, but they did see Elderlings. I don't know.
That could be.
And so the only help that they could get was him carving his own stone dragon because the dragons wouldn't be able to help.
Right.
So maybe that's kind of a timeline.
Right. And also, how would they know what to do to create these stones? Because Elderlings were the ones doing it to begin with.
They did it for art. Yeah.
Yeah. So how would Wisdom know to do that if there weren't Elderlings to teach him?
Mm-hmm.
So apparently, they had to have been around together in some capacity. It just is... The timeline is a little murky on pre-cataclysm, post-cataclysm.
I'm guessing it's post. I'm guessing it's post. There's multiple feet of dirt buried on top of, and trees on top of the city, Right. I feel like it has to be.
But even so, why then wouldn't there be any discussion of the Elderling city isn't fully intact anymore, or they moved?
They might not have. Well, maybe they didn't know the city was there.
They didn't travel that far.
Yeah. I don't know. Obviously, we're not going to know. Right. But I think that's kind of shaping up to be my headcanon for a timeline, is that it was post-cataclysm. The dragons were pretty much all gone. Elderlings were a remnant of a remnant. And not all of them had moved, to Aslevjal or whatever.
Right.
A couple of them stuck around and met with Wisdom.
And I guess they probably would die out if... It's not a genetic thing that makes them dragon people. It's the dragon's gift.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can pass it on to your children. It's, I mean, I guess unless you're obviously your child was blessed also by your dragon, but without dragons around.
I think like Rain Wilds, they would pass it on, but they would die out because the mortality rate is so high.
True.
For like Rain Wilders, for example. So I feel like without a dragon to guide those changes, it would be the same thing for Elderlings without a dragon there.
Okay, fair enough.
So like they could have children with those changes, but they could die in early childhood without somebody to guide those changes.
Right. Yeah.
Because it would just deform your body.
Fair enough.
Like for small Ephron, he has trouble breathing, right? Because his lungs are like compressed by his changes or something.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like it's things like that they would just die out within 1 or 2 generations without dragons there.
Yeah.
So maybe they made a deal with wisdom to, we'll teach you how to save your town if you help our children this one time.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
But anyways, thank you, Dana, for that comment. There's also more talk about my kind of rant and my musings into Rain, the Elderlings' skill, and what the Farseers had.
Right. And Ellen comments on this, saying that she doesn't agree that Elderlings aren't skilled.
Yes.
She thinks that the skill arises from mixing blood with Islanders as Levjal, surrounding with 6 duchies / mountain folk / Kelsingra surroundings, just because traces of skills are left from the Elderling.
Mm-hmm. Which we've talked about before. It's kind of like the mixing of the bloodlines.
Yeah.
Elderlings kind of dispersed, and like through their bloodlines or being around there, they were open to the skill, and you mix the 2 kinds of people, Out Islanders and Farseers.
Gives you more skill. Yeah. Right. So that Ellen believes that it's that the Elderling blood that gives the skill to regular people now. And then also that Elderlings of old would not have had the same problems that Rain is having because dragons didn't bother as much with humans.
Yeah. This was a good point to make, because Tintaglia only has time to mess with Rain and Malta right now. Yeah. Like that's all she can do. So yeah, other people wouldn't have this issue of like being invaded by dreams and having no walls, because dragons didn't care about humans before.
Yeah. We see from Rain's point of view that the dragons like see them affectionately, but more like you see somebody else's pet, I guess, not really even your own pet. And
sometimes your pet if it's your Elderling.
Right.
But your pet that's independent, that you have live on a farm for a while, then come back and visit once in a while.
Yeah. So they don't care, and they're probably not interacting as in depth with the Elderlings as this current round of dragons have to.
Right.
Because these new Elderlings don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to take care of dragons. Dragons have been extinct for a while. So there's definitely a lot of changes going on. And I think that is a really good point to remember, that
this is unique.
Yeah, there wouldn't be that draw. I guess people probably still were obsessed with dragons, but there wouldn't be as much
built whole cities for
Yes, yeah. There wouldn't be as much contact though with the dragons getting that information back.
Ellen also says that the Farseers could have possibly developed the skill in different directions, being more like human to human interactions, things like that, because dragons weren't around to take up all of their thoughts, like the skilled person's thoughts, which also makes sense. And, it kind of plays into my thoughts of like Elderlings had something different than the skill, because we don't really see them or hear them talk about like talking with each other or, manipulating other Elderlings. It's always about the dragon. So that totally makes sense with that line of thinking, that the skill or the magic that the Elderlings would have had could have been the same source, but it was used differently because of their environment and their society.
Right.
And the Farseers developed something else because they had to. And that was what was useful to them, because dragons didn't exist.
Yeah. And I guess it also like kind of supports like evolutionary like traits and how that, how that evolves over time from one need to another. I don't know. I like it adapting something from being for one need to another. Yeah.
So thank you, Ellen.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. And then Dana also points out that we will have to look out in the Rainwild trilogy for
quadrology. There's 4 books there. It's going to take 5 years to go through those books.
Probably. We'll have to see how the new Elderlings sense the skill and how that works. How, like, knowing,
see if they interact with it at all, or if there's mentions.
Yeah. So that'll be something that we'll definitely have to keep in mind as we go through those books.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we have on Facebook, we have a comment about this from Cookie Baker.
Yep, replying to the same thread.
Yes. So Cookie Baker talks about how, first points out that Tintaglia seems to think that Rain and Malta are not full Elderlings.
Which is also something, before you continue, which is also something that we pointed out that we need to keep an eye out for, because the way to create an Elderling seems to change in the Rainwilds.
Yes.
So we need to keep an eye on what constitutes a full Elderling versus what they do to get there.
Right. And Cookie Baker says that there might need to be a few generations of Dragon Touch to acquire all of the building abilities of the Elderlings.
Right.
And that the people that live in Rainwilds are already changed somewhat. And Liveship families have also trained their mind to the skill for their bond with the live ships. And then most of the Elderling longevity comes from their bond with the dragons, and they have a hard time conceiving children. So the few that managed to pass on their genes to the local folk were probably the skilled ones that could heal.
Yeah, so talking about that first part, there's more to this comment, which we want to get into later, but talking about that first part, we know that the skill is hereditary.
Yes.
We know you can pass it on to your children, and that ability is hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of evident in how the Islanders and the Six Duchies folk mingle, and they get more skilled folk, and how all the Farseers have skill.
Yes. I do, however, want to point out, I think we kind of all talk about the Rainwild people as having Kelsingra ancestry in some way, or not Kelsingra, sorry.
Bingtown?
No, some sort of connection with the people of the village that they're digging up.
No, they don't.
Yeah, no, there would be no. So them having skill, because they're all originally, their ancestors are from Jamalia.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
it's just exposure, I guess. And that's why I think it is rare or important to have somebody who can interpret the city's secrets, like Rain.
Right.
And that's why I don't think everybody can do it. And that's why I think Rain is special in that he has more of an open mind to skill, or more of a connection to his internal skill that everyone has. And he has more of that than most people.
Right. Yeah. So I do think that is a thing that we should point out, because I do think that sometimes we murky that distinction a little bit as well. Right. It's not just
because they have the same, outward traits of dragon things.
Yes, and it's easy. They've been there for a really long time, so it's easy to forget that they actually probably wouldn't be descendants from Elderlings. It's just they have similarities to them because of where they live and their proximity to dragons.
Which is where Cookie Baker's comment of that it might take a few generations, which, the Rainwild Chronicle or the Rainwild Traders have had generations to be around these cities, be around dragon presence, and be around to the whisperings of skill 24/7. So they're getting a little bit more open, and that's where kind of Rain comes in here. And Bingtown is kind of close to that, but they're also the Bingtown Traders, like Cookie Baker states, they have connections with live ships, so maybe hereditary through exposure they're getting a little bit more open to, but it still could just be sometimes people are born with the ability to tap into more skill than other people.
Yes. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they're skilled and can do magic. It just means that they have more of a capacity for it.
Right. Because whenever we have Fitz seeing the destruction of the Red Ship Raiders through the eyes of the villagers who are unconsciously calling out to him, those people aren't described as being skilled. They are just open to skill.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really important distinction, because Galen does do that thing where he calls out to skilled people, right?
Yeah, Nettle does it later too.
Yeah. And so I think and we don't see those people have a reaction. There's not a ton of people that come and reply to the call. So I think that's also really important to note, that being open to the skill is different to having skill.
Yeah.
But
different degree of having it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is linked, and it does seem to be something that you are either born with or you're not.
Yeah. But it is something. Yeah. So for the first part of Cookie Baker's comment, we need to pay attention to what constitutes a full elderling. And we've also kind of established, and Cookie Baker agrees here, that Rain and Malta seem to be maybe not totally unique, but at least special for their groups in order to have the capacity for skill.
Right.
And Cookie Baker seems to be implying that a lot of the Rainwild people might be open to it as well. And a lot of the old trader people might be more open to the skill because of those contacts.
Right.
With, Wizardwood and dragons and the skill in general. But Cookie Baker does continue on talking about how the people, the Elderlings of old, who did manage to have children and pass on their genes, their hereditary skill genes, would probably be the ones who had skills strong enough to be able to heal the issues in their children.
Right.
Because Mercor tells Malta, apparently, that the Elderlings of old had such skilled ones that could heal her child if the dragon that made him was missing. So I'll have to watch out for that in the Rainwild Traders Chronicles as well. But apparently there is evidence in the text that old Elderlings could heal children like Fitz does.
Yeah, that there was at least some capacity towards it.
Mm-hmm. Cookie Baker thinks that even among the Elderlings that skill was rare, that dragons wouldn't be offended by their Elderlings healing their own body or their own, children's things, but that it would be kind of an affront if you just randomly did it to somebody else's dragon's kid or Elderling,
Right, like you'd have to be all of the same dragon brood. I don't know, selection.
Elderling faction.
Yes.
All under the same dragon. Otherwise, it would take some negotiation, Cookie Baker says, which I think is true. I mean, that's something that does come from Fitz's meddling with the Rainwild, the Kelsingro people, right?
They're very upset with him for...
Tintaglia is, I think.
Yeah. I think all of the dragon... Well, because it's not just Tintaglia that has an issue. There's one other at least also...
Yeah, I think Rapskull is upset at it because he's more of the general Teletor at that point than Rapskull. And I think the parents are like, yes, please help my kid. But some of the hard line, I'm immersed in the memories, you're doing this wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Cookie Baker thinks that they would have passed on that ability, and the Elderlings of old definitely had the skill. It was just a rare thing, and it would be differently taught, similar to what Ellen says, that it would be different capacities.
Right.
Like the Farseers went a totally different direction, and Cookie Baker's saying, yeah, the Elderlings of old probably had different factions of you can heal, let's teach you this stuff, and then there are the people who manipulate the liquid skill, let's have those do other things. The Farseers seem to be more of let's learn everything that we can that affects us directly, and the Elderlings of old seem to be directly affecting dragons or their kids.
Right. Yeah, and so it would be very separate. I thought it was really interesting to bring in the people who specifically worked with the liquid skill. And I wanted to bring this up because I have a distinct memory that when Centaura is in the memories of, I do not remember the Elderling woman's name.
Oh, Timera is in
Timera, sorry, yeah. When Timera's in the memories of whoever
Teletor's lover or whatever. I forget
the
her
woman
name too.
Elderling. I feel like I distinctly remember when Timera finds out about using of the skill, it's a very secretive thing. This is a secret well that they're drawing from, and I thought it was something kept from the dragons. I thought this use was a secret that the Elderlings weren't even admitting to the dragons that they were doing, and they were hiding from the dragons' knowledge and from other people. It was like a secret little society learning to do this thing because the dragons would react poorly to them using skill, specifically because they felt the dragons feel as though the skill is inherently theirs.
Yeah. And I didn't remember that specifically, but I remember it being a secret, and I thought it was just a secret from other Elderlings because they wouldn't understand or something.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know.
But I thought
I think you read it more recently than I have.
Yeah. And I in my memory, it was specifically some talk about dragons being jealous of the use of the skill and that they're not supposed to touch it unless by accident when they're feeding it to them or something. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But that's what I thought. So I found it really interesting, Cookie Baker's bringing that up as like
a different area of skill to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, because from my understanding, they're not even supposed to have learned that, which I think is a really interesting thing that we will definitely get into when we get there. Yeah. But
please let us know if you remember, or if you have parts of the text especially that indicate that it was a secret from dragons or something. Please let us know.
Because that would be really interesting. But if it's not, then yes, it's just another faction. They were definitely separating things, which I guess you can, if you focus on something, it's a lot easier to find more out about that rather than just broadly learning everything. So I get why you have this advanced society where you can just focus some people to certain tasks. But no, anyway, thank you guys for those. We really appreciate that insight.
Yeah. Thanks so much for everyone who sends things in. And again, if you have anything to send to us in the future, please reach out in any way you can find us.
We're also going to talk about 2 emails. One from Jonas, who is also talking about the skill rant from Luke. And Jonas says that he never assumed Rain had the skill. In my head, skill comes mostly from the north, the Out Islands, the royal Farseer family. The dragons in proximity to the Rain Wilds definitely changed something there, but in my mind, people from that area, Bingtown, Cursed Shores, aren't prone to skill at all, or very, very rarely. I think earlier we discussed Wintrow might have some dormant skill. Rain, I don't know. Everything Luke said made sense, though. Still doesn't feel entirely right.
And again, thank you for the email, Jonas. Again, I think the distinction has to be made between being open to the skill and being able to use it. Yes. I still stand by Wintrow has the skill.
Absolutely.
I still stand by that more priests of Saw have the skill than we know because we don't really see much. But from Wintrow's point of view, what he's doing is not exceptional. And people can do things better than he can, especially in healing. So I think that other priests of Saw have the skill and use it. Rain himself, I think he's just open to it.
Fair enough, yeah.
So I agree with you there to a point, Jonas, but I think that I think that you're incorrect in assuming just the North has it. I think it's called something else. It's more religious in a sense. It's not as this is magic, we learn magic, this is the royal magic up in the North as it is. I think it's more of a we're meditating, we're connecting with the world, we can do things. In the South. So
thank you, Jonas, for those thoughts.
Those are my thoughts, at least.
Yes. And then we also had an email from Anna, who also agreed that Greg and Rain's talk was icky and we don't like it, but pointed out that they had the first time reading through, they didn't love Greg and Althea together, but couldn't really pinpoint what it was that made them not like Greg. It just wasn't something they really delved into, but through listening to the podcast has realized that the thing that they don't like and why Brashen works better for Althea is that they feel that Greg doesn't get to know Althea. Greg treats Althea like an accessory and not like a person. And if Greg had even one deep discussion with Althea about her life, her decisions wouldn't seem as crazy to him, maybe.
Right.
And so the fact that Brashen is willing to hear Althea out and accept her and meet her where she is and grow together is what makes them such a good couple and why they work in Anna's eyes.
And Anna also talks about how Cyrilla drugged and poisoned Cosgo, and how she saw that as straight up self-defense. So Anna is talking about how until she is on shore in Bingtown, Cyrilla is at Cosgo's mercy. So keeping him sedated and dependent on her seems like a pretty smart way that Cyrilla can keep herself safe. She's such an interesting character because you never actually like her, but she is so real. I wish I could read these books again for the first time. So yes. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Like, we talked about how Cyrilla is not being great in that chapter.
Right.
How drugging Cosgo is not a great choice, but I do agree with Anna here. And it just goes to show, again, back to our conversation in this chapter about Kennit, things are not black and white ever. There are nuances to these characters and their decisions that they make, and this is a self-preservation choice that Cyrilla makes.
Right. And obviously, Cosgo isn't that great of a person, so of course it makes the most sense to keep him incapacitated so that he can't ruin her life further.
Yes, yeah.
So that is a good point, and we should have brought it up, but didn't. So thank you, Anna, for bringing that to our attention. And also, shout out to Degenhart, who made us a metal cover of our intro theme song. It was very fun to listen to. We really like that.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who writes in every week and has thoughts to share. We love hearing from you guys and are excited to see what else you guys will bring next time.